Good evening and welcome to a regular meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. It is the evening of April 20th, 2021, and it is 6 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to also invite you to begin the meeting by standing and joining myself in an invocation tonight led by Pastor Ron Lawler, and I will follow that with leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Lawler.
If you want to join me in prayer, Father, we thank you for the beautiful place that you've given to us to live and the wonderful opportunity we have to serve one another. I want to thank you for all those who give of their time and their effort to make our city that much better. Pray that tonight as we meet, that wisdom and peace and unity will be divided among all those who participate so that we might carry out the duties that have been given to us in a way that honors you and is a help and encouragement to all who are here and our citizens. Thank you for your love and goodness to us. I pray in Christ's name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor Lawler. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Before we continue with our meeting this evening, I have a statement I would like to make on behalf of the City of Oak Harbor. Chief Dresker and our Oak Harbor Police Department understand that the news today evokes feelings in all of us. We appreciate everyone's cooperation to maintain the safety of our community during this time of heightened awareness, both here and across the nation. The Oak Harbor Police Department continues to professionally work with all of you to make our city and our island a safe place to live, work, and visit. So thank you. Due to COVID-19, there is no physical meeting location per Washington Proclamation 20-28. Tonight's meeting may be viewed live via YouTube and replayed on cable channel 10. In addition, the public may call the following number: 623-404-9000 and enter the meeting ID number, which is 149-766-1467, to listen to the meeting live. This is for audio only. Council members and city staff are participating via teleconference. The staff sitting in council chambers are all physically distanced at least 6 feet apart and will be wearing masks when they are not speaking. Guests that are included in staff presentations will be excused from the Ring Central meeting at the conclusion of the agenda item as appropriate. So I'd like to turn to our city clerk at this time for our roll call. Julie?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Mandi.
Present.
Councilmember Heisen.
Present.
Councilmember Servadius.
Present.
Councilmember Wassinger.
Present.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Present.
Councilmember Mack.
Present.
Councilmember Goebel. Councilmember Goebel.
Present.
Mayor, all council members are present.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, we will then turn to our approval of agenda. Are there any suggested changes to the agenda? And hearing none or seeing none, we'll move forward with the agenda as presented. And I believe that we have a staff or a presentation tonight. We have Amber Truex, the Executive Director of Ryan's House for Youth, with a presentation. Welcome, Amber. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to present to you guys this evening. I'm going to do a presentation for a couple of reasons. One is we've just opened our drop-in center in Oak Harbor. So we've expanded into city limits. And two, I kind of wanted to make sure the council had an idea of what we all can offer for homelessness or to prevent homelessness for young people in our community. So in front of you, you can see our mission and vision. Ryan's House for Youth exists to provide Woodby Island and all of Island County youth safe and stable housing, supportive relationships, and opportunity for self-sufficiency and success. Our vision is Ryan's House for Youth will strive to prevent youth homelessness before it can take root, establish havens where at-risk youth and young adults can experience unqualified care in a safe and nurturing environment, help the vulnerable become self-sufficient, and create refuges that protect young lives on the islands. Next slide, please. We offer several different programs. We have the Oak Harbor Drop-In Center. We have 2 different housing programs. We have the Coopville Drop-In Center, and we have what's called street-based outreach. And I'll go into depth about those a little bit. Next slide, please. So our Oak Harbor Drop-In Center is our newest addition. That drop-in center space serves young people 12 to 21 who are currently enrolled or eligible to be enrolled in typically middle or high school. The drop-in center use is like a calm environment for the youth. They can come in and receive meals, snacks. We can provide showers at the Coopville campus or laundry there. We have a quiet counseling room that the Oak Harbor School District is kind of partnering with us with. There's an outdoor patio area. We have a huge computer lab, TV room with the PlayStation 4. So the idea is to give young people a space, maybe if they're a little older than the Boys and Girls Club, maybe they're couch surfing, to have a place to come work on their schoolwork, receive meals, build a positive, supportive relationship so that they ideally will stay in school. Maybe they are needing help with employment search at 16, 17, 18 years old. But that's the idea for that space. Next slide, please. Our housing programs, which are located in Coopville, there's 2 different pieces to that. There's emergency housing and there's transitional housing. That houses 18 to 24-year-olds. Emergency housing, we do 24/7 intakes. So maybe for like the Oak Harbor Police Department, if they're running into a young person in that age frame and they're saying, hey, I would like somewhere to go, they can come down to Ryan's house at midnight if they needed to. The transitional housing piece is after they've kind of been there for up to 90 days and have decided they want to work further on their goals. Maybe they're going to college, maybe they have obtained full-time employment, they're working on budgets, ideally they're saving money and their long-term goal is to be sustained out on their own. That space has all kinds of things. They have outdoor areas, they have chicken coops, computer areas, art studios. The list goes on and on down there. Like I said, transitional housing is up to 2 years. They start with rental of 20% of their income, and that goes up 5% each 6 months, capping at 30%. They have required savings that they have to prove. The emergency housing, sometimes people come in, they need to get on their feet, and they can quickly move on and get a roommate and move out, and they don't need to move into that transitional piece. Next slide, please. The Coopville Drop-In Center is for the older ones, 18 to 24, who maybe already have graduated. Maybe they're not choosing to go to school. Maybe they're not going to be in school. maybe they don't want to be in our housing programs, but they need somewhere to come have a snack or a shower, and a place to be. The idea of the two separate spaces was separating the age groups, keeping the middle and high school students, not gathering with the young adult ones. It offers all of the same services, maybe getting them back into school if that's what they want, employment searches, assistance and transportation to appointments, pretty much IDs, anything they need, we'll help them do. Next slide. And then the street-based outreach, we have two, an SUV and a van. Well, we had a van. Well, now we have an SUV. And that worker will go to where we know young people might be and not coming in and using our services. Skate park in Oak Harbor, skate park in the South End. Libraries, oftentimes they'll go hang out outside of a library where there's Wi-Fi. The beaches when it's warm. Walmart's a big spot. They hang out in Walmart. And we kind of just talk with them and see, do you need anything? We'll offer services without them having to come to us. Next slide. Today, there was a couple of things. We wanted to develop more of a partnership with the city of Oak Harbor, address the needs for the young people in our community. Some of those needs that we're finding, and we would love to hear more if you guys are seeing other things, but there's a lot of 16 and 17-year-olds that we're seeing that are couch surfing and finding themselves really needing housing. Ryan's house can't house under 18s, and so that's a big need that we're seeing in the community over the last year has grown. And then to share the services that we do currently offer. We are in the process of strategic planning currently, so we would love to hear any feedback from anybody who would like to say, this is a gap we see in our community, and is this something you guys can help address? Next slide. And I would just like to thank you guys for allowing me to present what we do offer. And again, please feel free to reach out to me by email or by phone for any further questions. We have an open campus on campus in Cookeville or in Oak Harbor if anybody wanted to schedule a tour at any point in time. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Amber. Any questions? Okay, not seeing any from, I do see a hand up. Councilor Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor. Amber, I just want to say thank you for all you guys do. I am an employee of the Oak Harbor School District, and I actually have a student named Cannon who was so excited to tell me that he goes to Ryan's house after school. So that really warmed my heart. I was wondering, though, how can I help sign students up for that street-based outreach? Because I see and hear a lot of conversations too where I'm like, wow, you need an adult like to check in on you. You know, kids can only get so much at school. So how can I refer, or how does that partnership work? How can I help get kids kind of in your network?
So if you know of a young person and you know where they might be, you can always call that Oak Harbor Drop-In Center, or Oak Harbor Drop-In Center is going to be the best contact, and let them know.
Yeah.
I know we're working right now with the Oak Harbor School District to kind of figure out a plan if there's students that are at school, because a lot, you tell them to come into the school or into the Drop-In Center, and you can say, hey, go to this place, but they don't always make it. So we're trying to make a plan to where some maybe counselors or someone can maybe either bring them to the drop-in center, or we can have staff come to the school to meet with them. If that won't work, then we definitely, if you guys know where they'll be,
right,
or give us an idea, we can meet up.
Because those Wednesdays, now the kids will be at school 4 full days a week, but that Wednesday day, some kids that definitely need that extra kind of, I think, just guidance and help come to school. But I know there's a lot of students who don't because their parents can't get them there, or they might not have a parent who believes they need to be there and somewhat. So I definitely will be reaching out to you because I know a number of young people who need these.
Yeah, we're willing to mold, however we need to make sure these young people, I mean, they're our future. So
Yeah. And they're innocent, they don't choose these circumstances that they live in. Well, thank you. I appreciate everything you guys do.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Goebel, and then again, thank you, Amber. Appreciate your
Thank
time with
you.
us tonight, and I think this is a great way to get everybody thinking, and now we can help connect. So, thanks, Amber.
thank you.
You bet. We'll move on to section 3 of our agenda, citizen comment period. Citizens may comment at this time on subjects of interest not listed on the agenda or items listed on the consent agenda. Citizens may also comment on corresponding agenda items. To submit a comment, please use the online comment form at www.ocarber.org/public comment, or email the city clerk at jlindsey, Lindsey, @ocarber.org prior to 5 p.m. on the day of the meeting, or call 360-279-4539 to leave a voicemail to be played during the council meeting. Call to leave a voicemail after 5 p.m. on the Friday preceding the meeting and prior to 5 p.m. on the day of the meeting. When leaving a voicemail for public comment, please state your name, your first and last name clearly, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. While not submitted as specific to this evening's council meeting, the city did receive the following additional comments since our April 6th council meeting. These comments are provided here on screen as part of the meeting record and were forwarded to the city council. Okay, we will then now move to section 4 on the agenda, consent agenda. Staff has presented the listed consent agenda items, all of which were included in the meeting packet. And I would like to note and welcome tonight, Mandi Rothman is here, I notice. Mandi, sure nice to see your name again, and nice to have your time and efforts as an appointment to our Arts Commission, position number 6. Welcome, Mandi. Nice to see you. And with that, we have, that was consent item C. We have A through F. And unless there are any questions, they will be approved as presented. Looks like that is the case. So thank you again. I'd like to move on to mayor's comments. Community response to COVID-19, details and resources about the local impact of COVID-19 and city responses can be found on our website, www.ocarber.org/COVID-19. Vaccinations. For information on vaccinations, see the link to Island County Public Health's COVID-19 vaccination information page from our city website and Facebook page. Please wear your masks, watch your distances, and continue to wash your hands. Get tested, please, if you have any COVID symptoms or have been exposed. Oak Harbor Fire Department will assist in vaccine clinic. Our fire department will be assisting Island Drug in a mass clinic April 28th at the Oak Harbor High School. Check the Island Drug vaccination webpage for details as they become available. As part of Earth Day Week Celebration 2021, the city's Solid Waste Division offers these tips. Don't use single-use plastic. Please recycle. Please work to sort your waste and use reusable bags and containers wherever possible. Thank you from our Solid Waste Division. Well City Awards, congratulations to our staff for achieving our wellness goals and receiving the Well City Award for 2020 from the Association of Washington Cities. That's a big effort. I know staff works hard on that. I think a lot of you counselors are involved in that too, as I have been, to complete the wellness efforts, and that saves our city money each year when we are able to achieve that. So for the last several years we have, and again, congratulations to the staff and everybody involved for that effort. Oak Harbor continues in Phase 3. We're happy that Whidbey Island continues to be in Phase 3 of the Washington State Plan. Let's all do our part to keep moving forward. To quote the governor, take it outside. So I will turn now to the council for any council comments. Okay, not seeing any. We will immediately then go to our first item on our agenda, which is 7A, Ordinance number 1926, Harbor Heights Rezone. This is a closed record review, so I believe that this evening we have our City Attorney Grant Weed and our Senior Planner Kat Kamak to do this presentation. And I think we'll be starting with our City Attorney Grant Weed, who has some questions of council. Is that correct? Grant, welcome back.
Yes, it is, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, council and staff and members of the public. Before you tonight is a closed record review of a hearing examiner recommendation on the rezone of the Harbor Heights property. This matter is required to come before the City Council for final action in light of the state law, RCW 36.63.130, which limits your authority to delegate a site-specific rezone like this to your hearing examiner. So the final decision on this is for the City Council to make. However, your review is limited to a review of the record that was before the hearing examiner when he conducted an open record public hearing, and to determine if the hearing examiner's findings and conclusions support the recommended decision that is made to you. In this process, you are not allowed to take new evidence or testimony because the open record hearing has already been held. And so what we're here tonight for is a closed record review of the hearing examiner's decision. Because this is a site-specific rezone, it is considered to be a quasi-judicial process, and it's appropriate to ask all council members on the record a few questions before we proceed. This is generally referred to as a colloquy. If you could bear with me, I'll ask the necessary questions, and if any of you wish to respond in the affirmative, please do speak up either at the time I ask the question or at the end of this colloquy. Your Council Rule 19 requires that the City Council determine prior to the staff presentation and your closed record review in this case, in any quasi-judicial matter, whether the appearance of fairness doctrine requires that any of you recuse yourself from sitting on this matter. So I'll go through the questions. First, does any member of the council have either a pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest in the outcome of this proceeding? Second, does any member of the council know whether or not their employer has a financial interest in the property or area that will be impacted by the decision in this proceeding? Third, does any member of the council live or own property within 300 feet of the area which will be impacted by the decision in this proceeding? Four, does any member of council have any special knowledge about the substance of the merits of this proceeding, which would or could cause you to be prejudiced concerning the outcome of this proceeding? Five, is there any member of the council who believes that he or she cannot review this matter fairly and impartially, both as to the respective positions of any proponent or opponent of this proceeding? And six, has any council member had any ex parte contacts concerning this matter? So to those questions, does any council member have any information that you feel should be disclosed concerning a potential appearance of fairness issue? Okay, seeing none, then the last question is there any person attending this meeting who, because of the appearance of fairness doctrine, wishes to disqualify any member of the council from hearing this matter? If so, state the council member and the reasons why you believe the council member should be disqualified. And hearing no one coming forth, we've addressed the appearance of fairness issues, and we can proceed forward with the staff report. Thank you very much for your patience.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. This is Kamak, Senior Planner, Development Services. Thanks, Grant, for walking us through that. I'm going to have a really short presentation. Most of the material is in the hearing examiner's report, and it's in your packet. So I won't go through the packet and the contents of that. Just want to give you an overview of the process and how we got here. I have a short couple slides to follow along. If I can share my screen. I hope you can see that. So can you see my presentation? I'm assuming okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. This is the rezoning for the Harbor Heights. And as council is aware, the plans for this project started with the Parks Plan, and in 2020 was considered in the comprehensive plan for a land use change. City Council approved that land use change. And the zoning is a designation that's required in order to actually develop the property, issue permits, and so on. So this rezoning is in an effort to get us to that position. So the hearing examiner conducted the hearing on this rezoning on March 17th and recommended approval. The findings and the conclusion of that report is in your packet. As we started off this meeting with the closed record review, you get to make the decision as a council on this matter. So this is the recommendation for the project. I have other exhibits, land use maps and things like that. If council has any questions, I'll be happy to bring up more information to share with you from the hearing examiner's report. So with that, I will turn it back for questions.
Thank you, CAC. Just want to make sure with our city clerk that we've got no input from anybody outside. No, we don't. So we'll turn to the council. Well, I guess this is closed record anyway, so that's, sorry about that. Didn't even need to ask that question. So Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. I'm just scrolling here. If there's no hands, I will make the motion, but I'd also just like to thank staff, everyone involved in this process. I think for those of us that are here, it's one of those landmark events that's starting what will hopefully be a regional place in Oak Harbor that people will come to. So it may seem like a simple gesture getting this process started by changing the zoning, but I think it's an actual kind of a landmark or watershed event. So seeing no other hands, I move, rather than reading all of this, I move to accept the recommended action as presented in our packet.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to accept the recommended action as presented in our packet. Motion by Councilor Servadius and second by Mayor Pro Tem Munns. Any other input or questions? Seeing none, I will ask for all in favor to raise your hands. And that passes unanimously. That we have 7 who have voted yes, and then we have none left to vote no. That is passes unanimously. Thank you, council. That's fabulous. I agree with Councilor Servadius that this has been a while in coming and is certainly great to see it here. So now we'll go to 7B. And 7B is Resolution 21-15, designating 75 acres of real property known as Harbor Heights as a city park. And again, we have our senior planner, CAC Kamak. CAC?
I'm going to step in here. David Cool, Director, Development Services.
David Cool. Okay.
Yes.
Take it away.
So thank you, sir. Thank you, folks. This is a meeting to talk about the next move, which is to designate this area as a park. As you know, you just went through a comp plan amendment in 2020, and the hearing examiner approved the rezone on March 17th. You just considered the rezone and approved that. Thank you very much. And consequently, a park designation is needed. This designation as a city park under Oak Harbor Municipal Code, Chapter 6.12, Parks Code, will allow the police department to enforce a range of criminal sanctions and civil tools to deter illegal behavior. Now, I know Chief Dresker has been waiting for this particular park designation for a while, It just gives the police department a whole different set of tools than just the city owning the property. By a park designation, it makes a big difference for them. So this is your recommended motion, and we are available for any questions you may have.
Okay, are you going to put the recommended motion on the screen there, Dave?
I can put it back, you betcha.
In the meantime, I'm going to go to Mayor Pro Tem Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. And what Mr. McCool said, our city police have been waiting for this, even though it's on a county road. Will they answer the calls first for this 75 acres, or will it be a joint effort between the county sheriff department and our police department?
I would think as Chief Dresker there, maybe he wants to answer that.
I think that he is in attendance from a far teleconference. But I haven't.
I can take a stab at that too.
So I think let's go to our city administrator just to, in the absence of the chief.
Yeah, we haven't had discussion on that, and so the city's already been looking at it, and we've had issues. You remember when we purchased the property, there was illegal dumping on the property that we had to remove. So certainly we can take the lead on it. We do have other property that's outside a city limit that we own that we have to police it as kind of police, but we have to work with the sheriff. But since it's in city limits, regardless of the access, the city has the ability to police that, and our city attorney's there, and you can make sure I'm right, Grant, on that issue if you want to comment on it too.
Yes, thank you. Because this property is in the city limits, our city codes do apply, and by making it a park, our park code specifically applies. But that's not to say that the sheriff's department and our city police department wouldn't be working together in tandem. We have mutual aid agreements that have us working hand in glove. So if there was a violation, say out in the county road, the county sheriff's office would work together with us. And if they saw something going on at the property that was of concern, they would certainly work together with our city police department. But once the property has come into the city limits, all of our municipal code and our criminal penalties within that property, well, I should say our criminal and civil penalties would apply rather than island counties.
Okay, thank you very much, Grant.
Any other questions at this time? You see the recommended action is to adopt the resolution designating the two parcels as a city park. So I see Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. If there aren't any other hands raised, I can't see that. I'll make the motion.
That'd be great.
I move to adopt Resolution 21-15, designating 75 acres of land and two parcels as a city park.
Second.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we've got motion, and it reads exactly like the recommended action in the packet. The motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Munns. I believe the second, it was really close, but I'm going to give it to Councilor Servadius on the second, and seeing no other questions, all in favor, please raise your hands. And that passes unanimous. Unanimously, we have 7 yeses. Thank you very much, Council. So that concludes Section 7. Our next section is section number 9, Housing Action Plan. And for this evening's presentation, we have Senior Planner Dennis Lefebvre. Dennis?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. I will kick this presentation off and then have our consultants team come in and do a more in-depth presentation on the Housing Action Plan. My intent is just to give you kind of a refresher overview of what's occurred with this planning effort. We began about a year ago, and as you are well aware, we received a grant from the Department of Commerce, and by your direction, we utilized that grant to prepare a housing action plan. With that funding, we secured the services of LDC, a consultant firm out of Woodinville that has been very instrumental in helping us move this forward. We presented in the past several of the bigger elements of this plan, including the project charter, the public involvement plan, which obviously was the development of our webpage, which was very instrumental in getting a lot of the information out to our citizens, as well as coordinating the convening of a stakeholders advisory group. We had 3 meetings, 2 last year and 1 earlier this year, which helped provide input on their perceptions of the housing market in the city of Oak Harbor. We also presented late last year the housing needs assessment, which was a very comprehensive data gathering effort performed by LDC. It showed a lot of the demographic profiles of the community, income profiles, housing status, gave us a lot of good base information to work from, and also assisted in showing some of the gaps and some of the trends of our housing market in the city. This meeting tonight is to present the Housing Action Plan. The plan itself provides kind of a framework and a jumping off point to look at some of the recommendations, actions, and strategies that would help us fill some of those gaps and trends in our housing market. Again, these strategies and actions were kind of a teamwork effort between analyzing the needs assessment, as well as the hard work that the North Whitby Affordable Housing Task Force performed a couple of years ago, and some of the ideas of the Stakeholders Advisory Group. So with that, I would toss this over to our consultant team. We have Todd Hall here with LDC and Matt Covert, and they will take us through a little bit more in-depth presentation of the Housing Action Plan itself. So, Matt, Todd, welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Dennis, Mayor, council members. Thank you very much for having us on the agenda this evening. As Dennis mentioned, my name is Todd Hall. I'm the planning manager at LDC Incorporated. We're located in Woodinville. And tonight I also have Matt Covert. He's one of our planners at LDC that's working on the project with us. And we've been working together with city planning staff for a number of months, probably since the latter part of the summer of 2020 or midsummer. And now we've reached the point to the home stretch, if you will, on the Housing Action Plan. So I have a presentation that I will put up on the screen here. So just give me one moment here and I will get that ready to go. I'll share a full screen. And hopefully, is everybody able to see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yeah, there it is.
So just to kind of get started on the objectives this evening, as Dennis mentioned, we have tonight is the draft housing action plan, but I'll go over briefly about the project schedule as well as the housing needs assessment overview, just to kind of recap of where we've been on this journey. So in terms of the housing crisis, I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that's lived in the Puget Sound region, and that includes, Whidbey Island as well. It's certainly not immune to that, is the challenges of affordability. And it's a global issue, especially in Western Washington, but I would say as a statewide issue. And so as a result of that, in 2019, the state legislature passed House Bill 1923, which just a piece of that is on your screen there. And the primary goal for this was to increase residential building capacity in a number of jurisdictions. And with that, there was $5 million allocated for grants for jurisdictions. There's a number, like a toolbox of options that jurisdictions were able to accomplish this goal. And one of them is the Housing Action Plan. And that's what the city of Oak Harbor chose to do under this HB 1923. And the deadline for completion is June 30th to the Department of Commerce. And we're happy to say that we're right on schedule. And so as we mentioned, or Dennis mentioned, that will be, final draft will be forthcoming in the next several weeks. We're just tidying up a few remaining items, but we're happy to report that we're right on schedule, moving right along. So to kind of recap on the overall project, first what we started on was the housing needs assessment. And really what that is kind of a ground truthing, like really what is happening in your community. And it's really to understand the existing and projected housing needs at all income levels. So that goes from the most affordable to the most expensive housing, and in all different stratas. One thing that we did as part of this exercise is we documented housing and household characteristics, and then identified cost-burdened households. And we also analyzed population and employment trends by gathering a number of data sources that are available statewide. And then we also evaluated the potential for success in addressing specific housing challenges. So with this document, the primary objectives was really to kind of develop a number of data sources that we would be able to then review and use to then feed into the next step, which is the housing action plan. So we developed, as part of that needs assessment, a community profile, a workforce profile, a housing inventory, a gap analysis, and then a land capacity analysis. And the last one, the land capacity, is really important because that's kind of what is available currently to accommodate some of these potential options or housing options. So moving on to the housing action plan, this is really the consideration of strategies to then minimize low-income residents, and then develop strategies to increase the supply and the variety of housing, and then include a schedule to implement the recommendations of the housing action plan. So kind of the overall objectives for this is really to have a number of strategies and recommendations that would then potentially address, or hopefully address, some of the housing challenges that you're facing locally. And also analyzing, that would then feed into potential zoning code and also comprehensive plan policies and goals in the future that the city staff could then analyze. And then also reviewing existing housing policies and actions that are in your comp plan, and then have a schedule of programs and actions that could then be implemented. And just as kind of a side note is that, you may have recalled or in the past that the county, Island County, was involved in a similar exercise recently, and we used some of that data to help inform what was going to be happening in Oak Harbor as well. So some of that work was useful in building some of the strategies that we're developing for the local Oak Harbor plan. So to kind of just go over the schedule, like I said, we started last, about a year ago. So April, May timeframe. We had the kickoff meeting and project charter developed, which Dennis just briefly mentioned. That's really to kind of set the boundaries of what the project was going to be. And that's at that time we developed the project schedule and the public involvement plan. And then we also developed a website landing page, which some of you may have seen over the course of the year. And that page has been used as kind of a landing, a source for all the information on the project that both the city council, mayor, and public can view at any time. Then we also involved a number of public meetings through the stakeholder committee membership and engagement opportunities. So those were held multiple times throughout the last 12 months. And then, of course, we got into the housing needs assessment, which we completed about a month or so ago. And that included all the data collection and meetings with the Planning Commission. And then now that led us into the draft housing action plan, which was kind of overlapping at the same time, but we were waiting on a number of the data sources that we needed to feed into that housing plan. And now we're in that final draft stage, which you see there on task 5, which we've completed now the March, June timeframe on the bottom, which is preparing the final edits with the staff. And next week we will have a briefing, similar briefing with the Planning Commission. And then staff will then hold a public hearing with you to hopefully approve and adopt the document that can then be sent prior to the deadline in June. So just again, briefly to kind of recap on the housing needs assessment, you've got the existing housing inventory, the future housing demand, the account for housing market dynamics, and then identifying the gaps in the housing. And you're looking at kind of the existing conditions based on the demographics of the community, the workforce statistics, your housing affordability statistics, and housing production trends, which, on the stakeholder committee, we were fortunate to have a few local builders participating in that, and that was very helpful in informing some of the challenges and issues that are faced locally and what could and couldn't be done or is more of an opportunity versus challenging in Oak Harbor. Each community is a little bit different. And then lastly, and I'll hand it over to Matt, is the housing demand, which is a forecast for the next 20 years. And all of this information, of course, gets input into the housing action plan, which then leads into the key findings and strategies. So I'll hand the next section over here to Matt, and he'll lead the discussion further.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, City Council, and thank you, staff, for having us this evening. I'm just going to go over some of the key findings, the key takeaways from the housing needs assessment, and then go into a high-level overview of the strategies that we developed to address those housing issues that were identified in the HNA and in the stakeholder group and working with staff. And then we'll get into just a brief overview of some of the individual actions that sort of form that get in groups to form these strategies that will help us will help brief you on how the plan came to be as a result of the housing needs assessment and the conversations with the stakeholder committee and staff, and what it looks like going forward and what that means for the city. So just briefly on the housing needs assessment, just a few key findings here. So as you probably know, the city has grown pretty steadily, moderately high growth over the past 20 years, more than 3,000 residents, which for a city the size of Oak Harbor is significant. The highest growth in the 25 to 44 age group. No surprise there with the presence of the Naval Air Station that would be one of the biggest drivers of population growth in the area. But it's not just NAS Whidbey. There's also, 40% of Oak Harbor households are composed of 3 or more people, but some of the biggest affordability challenges come in the form of those smaller households who are often renters and can't necessarily find an affordable place to live. The average home value in Oak Harbor rose from $229,000 to $333,000 from 2011 to 2019. And in that period, rents increased more than $300 a month, the average rent for the average 2-bedroom apartment. That, of course, obscures a lot of variation within those rental and owner categories. What we heard from the stakeholder group, particularly the builders, is that it is increasingly challenging, if not impossible, to build single-family homes for less than $300,000 a home, which, when you're dealing with a lot of 25 to 44 population who is renting and potentially wanting to move into the ownership market, presents a barrier in the housing market. As far as housing production goes, single-family homes production has somewhat recovered in the city since the recession of 2008-2009, 342 new homes over that time, but very little multifamily has been permitted. That's changed in the past couple of years. There have been a couple new projects that have been permitted, and that trend will likely continue. But it's fair to say that there's unmet need out there for in the rental market. To accommodate the expected population growth that the state projects by 2036, which is kind of the end of the growth horizon, you need an average of 78 new units a year based on current household sizes. So there's a lot of caveats there, but just to give you a scope of an idea of the scope of the housing demand and housing supply, in some cases mismatch. 342 new single-family homes, very few multifamily over a 9-year period, and the city will need to produce about 78 new units per year of various types to meet demand. Next slide, please. So what we did when we set out to take into consideration the HNA results and the conversations we had with the stakeholders and the public input through the website, we looked to identify some issues and turn them into actionable strategies. So, basically I like to think of these as buckets into which you can pour different related things the city can do to address an issue, and turn it into something that can be that hangs together as a cohesive strategy, a wide variety of actions that you can take within each of these categories. But these 5 strategies, particularly the four non-affordable housing task force items, are sort of topical and related to different elements of the housing supply and demand dynamic, as well as providing support for people who are at risk of displacement. I'll note that, as Todd mentioned, we really took great pains to incorporate the findings of the Island County North Whidbey Affordable Housing Task Force. Every recommendation from that report that had something to do with the city of Oak Harbor, that had a recommendation for the city of Oak Harbor, made it in some form into this housing action plan. So all of the action write-ups that have an element, either the whole thing is an action that was identified in that report, or an element of that action, one of the potential ways of addressing that issue, have to do with one of those items, one or more of those items from that task force recommendations list. So that was really crucial for us. Next slide, please. So this is a list by strategy of all the actions that we developed. You'll notice there's a lot of repeats on here, and that's by design. Individual actions the city can take, whether it's preserving existing affordable housing or incentivizing new housing, or conducting property inventory and maintenance bonuses to prevent displacement. These are all things that can cut across a number of different issues, and that's reflected here. So strategy one, incentivize new rental housing, is all about using the tax structure and using the code to incentivize new rental housing where it's needed the most, and of the type that's needed the most. This includes multifamily tax exemptions. It includes allowing first floor residential in some commercial zones. It includes the use of density bonuses. It also includes, this was one from the task force, attracting professional and experienced affordable housing developers. That's a big, that's a big topic that requires a lot of thought and care. But that was one that really stood out to us as a way to incentivize not just new rental housing, but more affordable housing, which is needed in the community. The second strategy there is bring down the cost of development. So this has a lot to do with the development process and to do with fees and the efficiencies in the process. So a couple repeats in here from the previous section, actions that address both of these strategies, but this one really focuses on reducing impact fees, reducing direct costs, reducing indirect costs, such as SEPA exemptions for infill development that could get worthy projects through the pipeline faster. It also includes a couple of code updates that have to do with things that add to the cost of development, that we can introduce some flexibility in a really measured and well-studied way to help bring down some of those costs where it's appropriate. Strategy 3, provide a wide variety of housing types. So this really gets at that issue of missing middle housing. You may have heard of duplexes, triplexes, cottage housing, accessory dwelling units. So the city already has ADU standards. What are some ways we can improve that? How can we permit and clarify some tiny homes and park model homes, using the subdivision code to allow subdivided townhomes where you actually own the land, as a way of incentivizing entry-level home ownership? And then this idea of using the zoning code, looking out a little further than just the next year or two, using the zoning code to more strategically locate some slightly higher density residential uses, particularly in the R3 zone, within areas currently are zoned R1 that haven't necessarily developed yet. So these are just some actions that we write up and that we analyze, and we recommend how the city could, if they wish to, adopt some of these actions to get at these big housing issues. Then the last one, prevent and mitigate displacement. This is all about existing affordable housing is an extremely valuable resource. It's orders of magnitude cheaper to just find a way to keep existing housing that is already affordable there than it is to tear it down and build new affordable housing. So how do we do that? There's elements in here of property maintenance incentives. There's elements of that multifamily tax exemption, which can be used to actually provide support for people in affordable housing, and then the use of updating landlord-tenant ordinances to help head off displacement where appropriate. So these are the strategies that fall into those topical buckets that I mentioned before. And I'll note here that that the Housing Action Plan is a really cool type of plan, because unlike a comprehensive plan where it looks out 20 years and it has implements the Growth Management Act and has the binding force of law, the Housing Action Plan is a toolkit. Nothing in here by adopting this plan is the council saying we will do all of these things. It is we're asking for an endorsement of the plan, generally speaking, which contains a set of tools that the city can use, and some summaries and analysis of these tools to say, if you want to do this, here's where it could be used most appropriately, and here's some pros and cons to look out for, as well as some examples of communities that already use this tool and use it successfully. So you'll see that in the plan itself. Each of the write-ups for these actions contains a description of it, sort of the background, why it's important, why, how it could help address that particular strategy or strategies, and then the pros and cons of doing so, and the existing examples that can help guide the way. Next slide, please. So the last one is, as I mentioned before, this is implementation of the recommendations of the Affordable Housing Task Force. The ones listed here, these are the action write-ups that contain one or more elements of those recommendations. I believe there were 26 of them that from that 40, that list of 40 that affect the city of Oak Harbor. And so this is our way of really paying deep attention to that work, and not letting it go to waste, but on the contrary, turning it into some actionable, more detailed planning recommendations that can help move the needle on addressing housing challenges. Next slide. So that is our brief overview of the Housing Action Plan. Again, this is a community-led effort, and I think Todd and especially Dennis can attest to this. We've worked really closely with the city and had just a really productive and wonderful relationship with the advisory committee and city staff and the commissioners and the people who have been involved in the process. This is an opportunity to do planning without making it mandatory. This is the fun stuff, because this allows us to look at stuff in that window between, that sort of that 1 to 5 year window of how can we move the needle in a much more rapid way than most plans on addressing housing challenges, because it is in many ways it is a crisis, whether accounting for COVID or not. Housing is an absolutely elemental element of planning, and it's one of the biggest sources of stress for folks, but also one of the biggest sources of opportunities for local governments. And that's why we're really excited to bring you this housing action plan. Todd, do you have any more follow-up there?
No, I'll just ditto what Matt says. We've had a great time on the collaboration between LDC and the city, and we're thankful for the opportunity to be able to assist you all at the city of Oak Harbor. And we're just looking forward to the next steps to move this project forward for approval and adoption. So that concludes our presentation. We'll hand it back over to Dennis and CAC or any of the planning staff that would like to make some additional comments.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Matt. As far as the follow-up schedule is concerned, we will be presenting to the Planning Commission next week, as Todd mentioned. I anticipate this coming back to the City Council at your workshop in May, just to see if you have any reactions, any comments, potential revisions to the plan. And then we'll tee it up for a June 1st adoption at your regular City Council meeting. That being the schedule, obviously it looks like there will be a lot of work to look at these actions and strategies among staff, and we anticipate bringing forth some of these recommendations to council for your direction and discussion. So with that, CAC or Dave, if you have any comments, I'd appreciate any of your perceptions.
The only thing I would comment on is that LDC did a real fine job in looking at all kinds of options for us. And I would encourage council to take some time to read through the housing plan and look at the options carefully and help us to move this forward. So I can see our work program is expanding rapidly, even as we're sitting here. So we have a lot of interesting things to work on, and I'm excited about this.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple comments. It was great to work with the LDC on the project. Definitely a big undertaking for the city to look at all the housing data and see how we can be a part of the way to strategize and address our housing regionally. partnering with local agencies and so on. So a lot of good actions in the plan, a lot of work, as Dennis said, that we'll have to consider and weigh moving forward how we want to deal with them. So excited about that. Thank you.
Okay, we do have a couple of counselors with their hands up, so I'd like to start off with Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Matt, for that presentation. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and hats off for the acknowledgement to our Affordable Housing Task Force Committee. I spent 2.5 years myself on that committee with 30 people in that room, that a lot of them being a lot smarter than me, and we put a lot of hard effort into that list, and your acknowledgement of that is important to us, because the reality is we put a lot of effort into that list, and we think we came up with a lot of great ideas, and with use of a lot of local knowledge and understanding of the state laws, and it's frustrating to me that we've spent 3 years sitting on that list, and we've accomplished the ADU change on that list, although we didn't quite accomplish it all the way, as parking became an issue within that we couldn't quite work through. And we accomplished one minor code change, making it so we didn't have to have the public hearing for the final approval of plats, right? But the rest of that list remains pretty well knocked away after 3 years, and hopefully with you guys' assistance in laying this out in a clear and distinct plan and timeline, and with the support of my fellow council members and the city administration, we can start making some forward progress and become leaders in this area rather than behind the 8 ball. One of the things I find interesting in your report when it comes to land capacity, which was a part you guys didn't hit on much in your presentation, but is a real important part of your report. Is there a reason you guys did most of your forecasting out 15 years instead of 20 years, which is kind of the general reference in the GMA?
Yes. So when we did the land capacity analysis, we were looking at the growth projections using the city's sort of a combination of the state's data and the city's comprehensive plan. And because the city's comprehensive plan contains some more detailed local information than the state projections, the city comp plan only went out to 2036. So in some cases, like when we talk about housing demand, we could kind of like prorate it out a couple years when it came to actually looking in detail at like the different zones and multifamily versus single family, small multifamily versus large multifamily. When we were crunching those numbers, it was easiest to just go to 2036 rather than 2040, just because there's a lot fewer assumptions we would have to make. But I mean, you're right that the plan horizon for this is 2040, and the growth projections for the city overall on the whole go out to 2040. But just when it came to that breakdown within the overall overall population projection, it was tough to say anything meaningful for those last 4 years, just based on the data we had from the comprehensive plan. So that will change as the next round of comprehensive plan updates happens in the next few years. And I think what we did in the land capacity analysis is I think we came up with a pretty good system of assumptions, and then validating those assumptions that can be replicated pretty easily. And we worked with city staff on that. We worked really closely with Ray and with Dennis. And so, we think that it's something that could be replicated anytime you get a new projection, frankly, whether it's in the comp plan, OFM. So there is a little bit of a mismatch there, but it's for a good statistical reason, and there's no reason why this can't be updated. And we think that's one valuable piece of this.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Matt. And an important thing came out of that. One of our jobs as a city is to make sure that we're planning for that 20 years of growth, right? And that's one of our jobs as council members, is to be thinking that far ahead. And you know, what your analysis showed here, of course, is the 92 acres of land yielding 706 dwelling units. And if we reference back to the 78 dwelling units per year needed just to keep up with the current demand, and, you know, barring any increase in personnel at the Naval Air Station or any, you know, significant industry coming to town, that's a 10-year supply. We have presently 10 years of supply within our current city limits. That's unhealthy, and we're seeing that now. We're seeing that as a real estate broker. I'm seeing that every day. I'm seeing families, you know, make offers on homes $20,000 and $30,000 over asking, and not only not getting one home, but not getting 7 or 8 homes. They've been shopping for 6, 8, 10 months. You know, it's not a healthy environment by any means, and obviously it's exasperating the situation we have in, you know, in prices. But this goes to show we're 10 years behind the curve, folks. You know, we're responsible to supply 20 years of good forward planning to our citizens as to where they're going to live and be able to, you know, grow into a bigger house as they grow their families. And we've got 10 years currently in the city limits. And, you know, we all know where that bottleneck's at, and hopefully we can work through that. You know, I'm certainly going to challenge, you know, the staff and the administration moving forward to, you know, really bite into this analysis and bite into you guys' recommendations and timelines you're going to work out for us. And certainly I commit, you know, to any of the staff members, you know, my assistance in, you know, doing what I can to provide your department with the tools that we need to start implementing some of this stuff and start becoming leaders in the community and leaders in understanding that, you know, when a husband and wife both work a full-time job and they work hard all day long, they should be able to afford a house in our community. And so that's important to me, and it should be important to the rest of us. And I'm going to challenge everybody to bite into this thing and let's get some of this stuff done. And thanks, Matt, for confirming, you know, a lot of stuff that we knew needed to happen. And we appreciate all you guys' hard efforts on all this. Thanks much.
Okay, thanks you, Councilor Wiesner. Mayor Pro Tem Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the gentleman for presenting tonight, and I'm excited to read it word for word. Did you investigate any private-public partnerships in getting building done in communities? Matt, you want to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll see in several of the actions that we report on, there's an emphasis on, you know, whether it's attracting nonprofit affordable housing developers or you know, engaging with service providers to better understand gaps in service and gaps in, you know, like what the actual needs are. Demographic needs of you know, who needs housing the most. That's definitely reflected in there. Todd, Dennis, do you have anything else to add on that?
Well, I can just chime in. I know sometimes in smaller communities, it's a little bit more challenging to have those public-private partnerships, but I would imagine that there are some service providers in your community or on the island that would be potentially interested. Really what it comes down to, though, as we pointed out, as Matt said, is it really comes down to numbers for these developers. You know, a lot of times it just makes more financial sense to save existing dwellings that have been there for years and try to rehabilitate those versus trying to build new units and trying to figure that out on a pro forma, you know, especially like multifamily. I worked for a number of years with the city of Linwood as the planning manager. And, you know, even there we had a number of challenges just getting public-private partnerships for a city of that size and within the metro area. So I can only imagine that, you know, the challenges that you all must face, you know, being kind of separated from those, more of the mass, so to speak, in the Seattle area. And I just know we did, Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, or CAC, we had a couple of those developers who did point that out, that it's not for a lack of really interest. It just really comes down to, does it make financial sense? And I think your more frequent flyer builders, I forget off the tip of my tongue, I have a couple of them, but Dennis, you probably know, but they certainly mentioned that they would like to have those opportunities. It's just really a challenge for them when they're basically kind of just scraping by to make the building numbers work for them. So I don't know, Dennis or CAC, if you have any additions to that.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I think we heard pretty loud and clear too that the COVID situation of last year has really impacted not only receiving and getting materials, but the costs of these materials have skyrocketed for these developers. So that was something we heard loud and clear as well.
Okay, I just want to be sure that there's flexibility and that the city isn't expected to follow what the county deems, because we have to think about our city and our citizens and what they need. And every government has their own budget that they need to live within. It's not like you can make a bundle of money off of things, whether it be the utilities or the roads or whatever. So I'm anxious to see the flexibility, but to also look at any options. But it doesn't seem in the past that our city has been very receptive to private-public partnerships and things. So anyway, I'm hoping this is exciting. But if we have questions, who do we send them to? Do you, Dennis? Or do we send it to the company?
I would recommend sending them to me. And then we will assemble probably a next version of revisions and get those off to our consultants, and then prepare a final draft for your review. But yes, send any comments or questions to me.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hey,
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any other input or questions? Well, Todd and Matt, thank you for your presentation, and staff. Really appreciate it. Be interesting watching this come forward. So thanks for your time and effort, and I think there's much more time to be spent on it. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Okay, we'll move on to our section 10 on our agenda. 10A is 2020 Fire Department Annual Report. And I believe we have our Fire Chief, Ray Merrill, for this.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
So the first thing I want to say is, as much as I enjoy giving this annual report, I really miss diving it in the council chambers and seeing everyone's faces while I'm presenting the report. Someday we'll get back to normalcy and we'll get to see everybody and chat at the same time. So with that said, I've got to thank Angela Bronstein. Again, she did a fabulous job putting this together. And in your mailboxes, you should have all gotten a page that looks something like this, with just a snapshot on it to tell you a little bit about the department over the last year. And I'm going to start my report. And if you have questions, please just jump in. So as we know, that 2020 has been a year like no other when we consider everything that has occurred this last year. One of our biggest concerns here at the department was to maintain employee and public health. We had a large concern about that with all the unsurety. We wanted to avoid any type of contamination and reduce the spread of COVID-19 as much as possible. Our routine calls became very complex. They weren't as easy as they used to be. There was a lot of things that changed. We had different dispatching criterias from the Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta design of non-COVID to COVID complete. And that changed our calls and how we changed responding to those calls. It also increased the amount of personal protective equipment. One nice thing here is, you remember back a few years ago when there was the swine flu, the SARS, the MRSA, we stocked up on personal protective equipment, so we had it in reserve, which was a good thing. And then we were consistently disinfecting the hands, the station, the apparatus. We remained open throughout the entire year. We had some changes. We canceled all of our public education events. We canceled a lot of our training activities, and station visits and tours were canceled. So there was a change here, but we did remain open. And I never realized how much stuff was in the CDC and LNI guidelines. As I continued to read stuff, it seemed like at times almost daily, to maintain and to keep up on the latest guidelines. We definitely had a good partnership with Island County. We worked hand in hand with Department of Emergency Management. We did work with the county public health official. We activated our EOC with the ongoing operations, and it is still open today because there's still data entry taking place. There is stuff happening up in the EOC, so it's worked out very well for us and Island County DEM. We also, as you probably all are aware, we were the storage facility for PPE for Island County. Eric Brooks would order stuff from the state inventory. We'd receive it, we'd secure the supplies, and then we did provide personnel for inventory and distribution of that equipment to all the different agencies on Island County. All of our employees remained healthy. We did not have a single COVID case at the fire department. Interestingly enough, a third of our paid on call firefighters were restricted for coming to work for us. They were Navy personnel. The Navy put out a bulletin that all of their personnel could no longer volunteer at any organization. So for that 6 months between April and September, when the Navy finally relaxed on that requirement, we did not have sufficient staffing to staff all of our paid on call shifts. And we were regularly running a 3-person engine company at night with some creative staffing possibilities or probabilities. Myself, as the Director of Emergency Management, I definitely got involved in all the potential exposures for all the city employees with the follow-up to make sure the testing was occurring, to make sure that everything that needed to be done for our employees was done. I assisted with the CARES grant coordination and spending of those funds. And I was continually reviewing the CDC guidelines and labor and industries and all of their recommendations to make sure our city was as safe as possible for our employees and people that visited our facilities. And I did get involved with safety and education materials through the social media channels. So we like to think we have a department like no other. We are quite proud of our department. Of course, as you know, we have about 24,000 people in the city. When we break down our career firefighters, we have 0.45 per 1,000 population. When we looked at our comparable cities, most of those have about a 1.25 firefighters to 1,000. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more a little bit later on. We do have 9.7 square miles. We run out of one fire station, as you all are well aware. One concern I have, and I'm going to talk about more in depth a little bit later on, is our insurance rating. I am really concerned that if we were to be re-rated today, I fully believe that we would go to a rating of 5, and I'll explain to you a little bit later on in this presentation. Our calls for service decreased just a little bit. We're down at 1,403. We did respond to 24 structure fires. Our average response time was 5 minutes and 54 seconds, 1 minute and 5 seconds longer than in 2019. And I'll explain about that here in just a little bit as well. So our personnel, that's our biggest asset. Those are both our career staff and our paid on call folks. We've got a pretty good group of people that work here. They take pride in the job they do. And I'm very thankful for the folks that we have. When we take a look at the years of service, we're going to break it down into paid on call versus our career staff. So when we look at all of this, the department, there's 18 people with less than 5 years. There's 11 people with 20 years or greater, 5 years with 5 to 9 years, 5 people with 10 to 14 years, and 5 people at 15 to 19 years. But when we look at our paid on call, we've got 5 people with 20 or plus years. And when you look at these numbers, these folks have been here for quite a while, 45 years, 40 years, 34, 27, and 24. A lot of institutional knowledge in those folks. They've been around a long time. You can see the 5 with 15 to 19 years. We've got some folks, 4 of them that have been here for 10 to 14 years. And then 52% of our staffing in our paid on call ranks is between 0 and 9 years. And we do have 2 true volunteers that work with us as well. In the green section of the picture, those 2 rows on the bottom are new recruits in 2020. So our career staff, 20 plus years, there's 6 of us. When you take a look at 10 to 14 years, there's 3. 5 years or less than 5 years, there's 1. And when you look at we've got 1 person at 5 to 9 years. Angela's up at almost 14 years. The concern I really have is that blue screen where you see 55% of our career staff is 20 years plus. We know that some of those folks are going to be retiring in the near future. My goal for myself is I'd like to stay at least another 5 years, get my 50 years in the fire service, and then finally retire out when I turn 65. I wish I'd be 65 at that point. But you can see that 55% of our workforce we're all eligible for retirement, but not in any hurry to retire. The concern I've got is our succession planning to move forward to take our positions when at some point in time, one of us decides to leave. But I can guarantee you right now, all of our folks are very happy. They're going to stay here for quite a few more years. When we look at our comparables, we consistently operate with 1/4 to 1/3 fewer resources than comparably sized Washington City fire departments. I've talked about this in other presentations, but just to break it down a little bit, when we look at our career staff, we've got 11 full-time firefighters. When we look at our comparables, they've got 28 full-time firefighters. Now that's an average, of course, and you can see all the departments across the bottom. A lot of those departments do have paid on call and volunteers as well. So that breaks down to 0.45 firefighters per 1,000 population. This is career staff. Our comparables have 1.25%, or 1.25 per 1,000 population. A big difference in numbers. Of course, Survey and Rating Bureau does give us some credit for our paid on call. But again, with paid on call, they are a fantastic group of people that do a fabulous job for us. But we can't depend on them 100% of the time because they do have jobs elsewhere. So this is a concern that I've raised before, is our staffing level. Of course, we have 1 fire station, and all of our comparators on the average have 2 fire stations. So when we break down our incidents, and I'm going to break it down into different groupings, when we look at fires, we had 24 structure fires, 16 grass fires, cooking fires, vehicle fires. You can see the list as it goes on, and I'll talk more about these a little bit later on. Our medical calls, we assisted Whidbey Health with 507 calls. You do know that we get reimbursed for those calls at about $113 per call. We've gone on to 112 motor vehicle accidents. We did respond on 25 non-motor vehicle accidents EMS calls, which means that Whidbey Health was absolutely unavailable to respond. So we'd respond on the call in their place, and we did do 8 search and rescues. We've had some hazardous conditions, electrical problems, natural gas leaks, gasoline or oil spills. We do a lot of public service calls in assisting invalids, water leaks, unauthorized burning, assisting other agencies. As far as false alarms go, we see this constant trend of the system activation of both being unintentional and malfunctioning. The unintentional is somebody burned something in the microwave. The alarm did what it was supposed to do, but it was an unintentional trip of the system. There has been some malfunctions. We've had some problems with smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, but this runs pretty consistent year to year. And then our good intent incidents, dispatched and canceled en route, no response, dispatcher error, and you can see the rest of the list. We are a full service fire department, so we do get a multitudes of calls. So when do they occur? Most of the time, they're during the daytime hours, nighttime. 34% of our calls are at night from 1900 till 07. 66% of our calls are during the daytime, 07 to 1900. Busiest hour this last year was 6 p.m. The slowest time this year, or last year actually, 2020, was 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. where we only had 19 calls. Busiest month was November at 144 calls. Slowest month was July with only 94 calls. Other years, it's been just the opposite. So there's no rhyme, no reason, no trending that we can find. Friday this last year was our busiest week. Other years, it's been Wednesdays or Thursdays. Again, no specific thing that we can attribute a specific day to. So we had a total of 1,403 calls. Last year, for 2019, when I made my report, I told you we had 11% of overlapping calls, 11% of the time. You can see how that's gone up to 17%, or 243 calls. We're having simultaneous calls during that 1 hour period of time. When we only have an engine company of 3 or even 4, we're relying on mutual aid. We call in the Navy, we call in North Whidbey Fire and Rescue to assist us if we don't have staffing for additional vehicles. So these demographics, when we look at our performance measures, this is what we compare against. As I said earlier, our incident response time on the overall average was 5 minutes and 54 seconds, 1 minute and 5 seconds longer than 2019. Our average turnout time increased to 2 minutes and 54 seconds. A lot of that is due to those overlapping calls because we have to wait for people to either come into the station, we have to wait to get the call to NAS, our dispatcher gets it, it sends it over to the Regional Dispatch Center for NAS, they dispatch their apparatus out of the Navy station, so that in turn increases our turnout time. That's the time from the time the phone rings until a vehicle is in response to that incident. And so you see how that's gone up as well. Our fire-only response time, average response time has been 7 minutes and 15 seconds. As you know, the council set up a few years ago, our average response time was to be 5 minutes. And according to NFPA 1710, our response time should be an average of 4 minutes. You can see that our average turnout time was only 39%. And we were only compliant with NFPA 17 for travel time 77% of the time, which is 4 minutes. Of course, that is due to growth, and that is due to the location of the fire station. When we look at medical calls, our average turnout time should be 60 seconds or less. We've been able to meet that 40% of the time. Our response time has been 5 minutes and 9 seconds. As you know, the council has established a 4-minute response time. Again, a lot of this depends on multiple calls at the same time, changes in our response patterns, different stuff that we have to do as far as complete PPE, which takes a lot longer to put on because of COVID. It's not a case of just jumping in the rig and going. Now we've got to gown up and put on masks and goggles and gloves. And when we put the gowns on, being able to securely get inside of the gown. So it's all time consuming. So when we take a look at the quadrants, and we compare this every year, our Northeast quadrant, we had 1 structure fire, 169 medical calls, 14 hazardous conditions, 73 service calls, 101 other calls with an average response time of 5 minutes and 2 seconds. Southeast quadrant, we had 14 fires, 3 of those were structure fires, 165 were medical calls, 16 hazardous conditions, 50 service calls, and 99 other calls. Average response time, 4 minutes and 38 seconds, which makes sense because of the location of the station. The southwest quadrant, we had 17 fires, 7 of which were structure fires, 220 medical calls, 25 hazardous conditions, 83 service calls, 135 other calls, for an average of 6 minutes and 17-second response time. Northwest, 6 fires, 2 of those were structure fires, 81 medical calls, 11 hazardous conditions, 11 service calls, and 53 other calls, for an average of 5 minutes and 38 seconds. So the Northwest quadrant, 12% of our call volume is in that section. Southeast quadrant, 24% of our calls. Northeast quadrant, 26% of our calls. And the Southeast quadrant is 34% of our call volume is in the southwest section of the city. So we take a look at that. Highest call volume, more than double the structure fires in the southwest quadrant, longest response time, and most calls for service in all call types, all in the southwest quadrant. So we had a residential structure fire on Southwest Waterside Court on November 9th. And if you take a look at Google Map, you can see the different routes to get there. You can see where the fire is located. Now this is 4 times the actual speed, but to give you an idea, the call was dispatched at 18:08:53. We were around 18:11:01, so a little over 2-minute turnout time, but it was a little over 8-minute response. Now imagine if you're standing outside of your house and you're watching your garage burn and your Harley Davidson motorcycles and your antique motorcycles and your house is on fire and it's taking us 8 minutes to respond. And you can take a look at the road conditions. It was rainy out. Again, this is 4 times the actual speed, but you can see that it does take time to get to the incident. And as we're responding, we're hearing more about the fire and the growth of the fire inside of the garage. We know the fire started there. And what I want to do is have you see a picture of the garage fire as we pulled into the incident. This is over on Waterside Court. It's a gated community. As we turn the corners, you're going to see what the garage fire looked like. So the fire is contained to the garage, 8 minutes and 14 seconds, total response time to get there. You'll see when the engine pulls up, and we were able to keep that fire contained to the garage, luckily. The people inside the house closed the doors to the structure. There was the proper protection within the garage, but again, it was an 8-minute and 14-second response time to get to it. So take a look at training. We've got this, Oak Harbor. To give you an idea of our training, we did offer 2,448 training hours. 1,600 of those were fire training, 318 were medical, 290 were fire officer training, and then you can see the breakdown for the rest of the training that was offered. We had a total of 7,255 training hours logged. We did provide 480 classes to our firefighters. We did conduct 2 firefighter recruit academies, but you can see how the numbers kind of moved around. In March, the total number of hours we had was quite high, and you can see how those numbers started to drop off a little bit. A lot of it because we weren't having our normal Monday night trainings with our paid on-call firefighters. We dropped that off completely for all of the remainder of 2020 because of COVID. We were getting shift training only when people were on shift. In our prevention division, we did investigate some fires, just to take a look at some of the damage within the structures. The property damage that was saved when we looked at the values of the homes and the structures was $3,473,000. We did get quite in depth into our investigation. We look at electrical systems. We look at anything that could have possibly caused that fire to occur. Our property loss was $605,000 for a 17% loss ratio compared to the amount of money that was saved in the fires that we were able to be successful in a good attack. Our findings during our investigation, now we did 27 fire investigations. We did go to Island County Fire District 2 or North Whidbey Fire, We assisted them, and we assisted Central Whidbey on some fires. But we get in and look for the origin and cause of the fire, and we may spend hours during that investigation to come into the origin and cause. Smoky materials, 5 of those fires. Combustibles too close to a heat source, 4 times. Unattended cooking, 5 times. We did have 4 intentional arson calls. We had 4 electrical overheated problems. We did come up with 4 totally undetermined. We just could not come with a cause. Neither us nor the insurance companies could come up with a cause. And we did have 1 power line that created a fire. Our prevention department issued 44 permits, 16 fire alarm systems, 14 sprinkler systems, 6 hood and duct suppression systems. There was some decommissioning of underground fuel oil tanks. There was 4 fireworks stands and 1 fireworks display in 2020. As far as inspections performed, we did 11 new ones. We did 753 inspections. We cut down the inspections last year because of COVID. We were very respectful for people's businesses. We tried not to go into them unless we absolutely had to. We always made arrangements prior to. We did do 93 re-inspections. Sorry, I had to stop for a minute. It sounded like we had a house fire coming in. As far as hydrants goes, we inspected 863 fire hydrants in the city. There was 216 crew hours and a total of 864 employee hours to do the inspections of those hydrants. So we like to be community service oriented. You can take a look at some of the fires that we did investigate. One thing that we do is we like to go out to the over 55 communities and replace the smoke detector batteries. We'd much rather send our crews out there to do it than have the seniors climbing ladders and trying to get up to change their smoke detectors. So during 2020, we did get out and install 50 different homes to install smoke detectors. It's a service we like to do. We get called for it, and it's a good community service to the neighborhoods. So move right for sirens and lights. And I'm here for you. If you have any questions, please give me a call. You can email me, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Was certainly a different year in 2020. I'll turn to council. Any questions or input? A lot of numbers there. I see Councillor Wiesner.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and thank Chief Merrill for that great presentation, concise as always. I did want to point out, Chief, we miss seeing you too, but I think I've lost 3 pounds because of not having the chocolate in front of me every time you came to present. So good seeing you, and again, appreciate all the hard work, especially in a very challenging year. Yeah, you wore several different hats last year, and a lot of the safety precautions we put in around the city and for staff, was coming from you, and you were juggling a lot of things, and we appreciate all the extra effort you took during a very, very, very difficult year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Chief, excellent, sure. And Sandra does a magnificent job with your PowerPoint. But I also want to compliment, your staff does a lot of wonderful things for community, but helping out with the mass vaccinations at the high school has given some people who have never run into you or any of your staffs open their eyes, and really we're so glad they happen to be volunteers when you and members of your staff were there also. So be sure to tell them thank you for all of that. Appreciate it.
Very well, thank you.
Okay. Again, we really appreciate everything you do, and I know all of council feels that way. I know many, many citizens feel that way. You do so much and stretch so many different ways. Thank you, Chief. Really appreciate your work and all of your staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on now. At this time, it is 7:49. I think that we're going to take a very brief recess and then move into executive session for the purpose of discussing litigation or potential litigation with legal counsel per RCW 42-30-110. Anticipated duration is approximately 45 minutes. Executive sessions are not open to the public, and if for some reason we need to extend beyond, I think what we'll do at 7:50, we'll begin about 7:55, and then should be in there until 8:40, and if we need to extend that, we'll be back. So at this time, we'll go to executive session and see you in about 5 minutes, council. Okay, so we are out of executive session at this point. A regular Oak Harbor City Council meeting. We've been in executive session. We're going back into open session at this point, and I believe that we'll have a motion here to extend our meeting. So I see Mayor Pro Tem. Your hand is up.
Thank you, Mayor. I will extend the meeting for 40 more minutes.
Okay. So that will be our regular meeting, and we'll extend beyond 9 o'clock for a total of 40 minutes past 9 or 40 minutes from now.
40 minutes from now.
40 minutes from now, that's the motion. Any second?
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to extend our meeting from 8:44 plus 40 minutes. All in favor, say aye or hand up to extend our meeting. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands.
It's unanimous.
What's that? Unanimous. Okay, it is unanimous. Okay, so our motion, our meeting has been extended, and then we will be going back into executive session at this time, and we'll come out before our meeting ends, our regular meeting ends. So we'll go back into executive session. Then at this time, Lisa, let me know when we're back in.
Mayor, we're going to go back in for 30 minutes.
You're good, Mayor.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene the regular session of the Oak Harbor City Council meeting of April 20th. It is 9:11. We've been in executive session, so we'll go back into our regular session now. A lot of discussion in executive session, but no decisions were made. So having said that, I believe we've exhausted our agenda for the evening. And unless there's no further business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. And again, thank you for a long evening. Be safe. Well, most of you are already home, so okay.
Reminder, we actually have a closed session now that Julie sent notice of. I'll let Chief, Merrill, and Emma in.
Oh, my goodness.
So Mayor, you just say we're adjourned and they'll take it off.
What's that? Okay, I guess.